Good morning, guys. So change the way you look at things, and the things you look at will change. Okay? Change the way you look at things, and the things you look at will change. Okay? Now you guys say it with me. Change the way you look at things, and the things you look at will change. One more time. Change the way you look at things, and the things you look at will change. You guys got it? See, I know as a speaker that there's only going to be two things that you guys probably will remember, and that's the first thing I say and the last thing that I say. So you got the first thing. If you remember nothing else, just remember that if you change the way you look at things, the things that you look at will change. Got it? Okay? So, when Petra asked me about speaking, anybody who knows me knows that I jumped at the chance and said, yes, I can't wait to speak. I'd be glad to speak, okay? And Petra gave me the topic and told me that the topic should be love in divine action. Divine love in action, okay? Divine love in action. You guys got that? And that's what we're going to talk about. But just for a moment, I just want to take just a quick moment, okay? Any of you guys know Darlene Fluker? Raise your hand. You know Darlene? Well, Darlene talked with me last week, and when I told Darlene I was going to be speaking, Darlene was kind of disappointed because I told her I wasn't going to be speaking on black history. So I told Darlene that I'd try to find a way to stick some black history in my talk. And I couldn't do it. It didn't work, so I couldn't figure out any way to put it in. But I want you to, guys, if you see Darlene, let her know that when you heard that soulful singing by Dina, that was a little black history, okay? So we're going to count that, okay? And I think that black history is divine love in action, so you just tell her that I touched on a little bit of black history in case she asks you, okay? So we got that part covered, okay? So when Petra asked me about speaking, I had to think about, well, what do I think about divine love in action? What would I tell folks? How does that show up in my life? Where do I see divine love in action? And if you know me, then you know that one thing I am is I'm a news junkie. I watch a lot of news, okay? I'm so bad. You get that, amen? That's from somebody who really knows me. And she would tell you that I record the ABC News, NBC News, CBS News, PBS News, CNN, and Fox, okay? And I watch one when it comes on time, and then I go back and watch all the rest, okay? I even know how to go so quickly I never see a commercial. But I watch the news, and I get a lot of information from the news. And it's a lot of negative news, I'll tell you. You know, the local news, it scares me. You know, because it's a lot of blood and gore and all that kind of stuff. It'll make you want to stay in the house. The national news with politics and foreign policy and all that stuff, it just frustrates me. So really, you know, the news to me, you can see what I call it, is, you know, CNN, constantly negative news. You know, NBC, nothing but chaos. ABC, all bad communication. It's usually just all bad news. You know, but what I learned is, too, that what you focus on is what shows up. So when I started thinking about divine love in action, I started focusing on and looking for divine love in action. And when I started looking at the news, I started seeing a different kind of news. You know, I don't know if it's true or not, but somebody once told me, and it's a good statistic, I'll just share it with you just because it sounds good, okay? They told me that 150 million to 300 million people at any given point in time are at war on the planet. You hear me? 150 million to 300 million. That's pretty liberal. That's a lot of people, right? But that's out of 6 to 7 billion people. So when you change the way you look at it, that's a very, very, very small fraction of people that are really at war. And when you start changing how you see things a lot differently. I want to share with you some news that I happened to see when I looked at things differently. Laney, you want to roll it?
Update tonight on a man Steve Hartman introduced us to just a few weeks ago. When life dealt him a difficult hand, there was only one way to play it: double down on optimism. Here's Steve on the road.
When we first met 42-year-old Chris Rosati, he had 1,000 things on his bucket list, and all of them were donuts.
I got 1,000 donuts on the bus.
It was part of this elaborate fantasy he crafted after he was diagnosed with ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease.
You had 2 donuts?
He wanted to give away donuts at schools and parks, cancer wards, and children's hospitals all over his hometown of Durham, North Carolina, for no other reason than to make people smile.
Because if I can't impact people, this whole thing is a waste.
Since that first airing, Chris's wisdom has been quoted on church signs and celebrated on social media. A lot of people wanted to know how a dying man could be so full of life. And one of those people was Chris Rosati.
I really wanted to know, though, am I crazy?
Right.
Which brings us to part 2 of his story.
You're not crazy. Well, you are crazy, but not in that way.
Chris is now working on a documentary he's tentatively titled The Blessings of My Disease. He's interviewing other ALS patients, like Anne Fortier, to see if anyone else has found the same silver lining.
The love that you feel for all the people in your life, it overflows.
Turns out, Chris is not alone.
I am happy.
Bob Anderson can't even speak anymore, but even he can relate.
Once you reach acceptance, it is a fun ride.
Watching the interviews, it's almost like they share a secret, a wisdom beyond us.
Do you feel that way sometimes?
Absolutely.
I appreciate what I have so much every single day.
See, I think I do too. But you think you're seeing something that I'm not.
I do. I listen to the pitter-patter of my daughter's feet running down the hall.
And you never would have noticed that before?
It would have been more background. Now it's the focal point. And you've never heard anything so great.
You don't want his disease, but you sure do want what he's got.
All right.
Which is why, in the year or so he has left, Chris promises to shed as much light as possible.
I want to be able to articulate what I know. If I have enough time, I'll change the world.
Steve Hartman, on the road, in Durham, North Carolina.
And that's the CBS Evening News for tonight. For all of us at CBS News all around the world, I'm Scott Pelley. I'll see you Sunday on 60 Minutes Presents. Good night.
Now, you notice that they changed the way they were looking at things. And when they changed the way that they were looking at things, even having a devastating disease, even that changed. Did you get that? It was based on what they focused on. And even when I began to focus on the positive and looking for those kinds of news stories, I found tons of those kinds of stories. Matter of fact, I found so many of those stories, if I kept showing them to you, there wouldn't be any time for me to speak. But I found a bunch of those kinds of stories. And what I learned and realized is that it depends on what we focus on. That can make the difference. And if we focus on, it's when you want to buy a car, if you focus on a Toyota, every car on the road all of a sudden will be a Toyota. What we focus on, that's what shows up. I've seen it work. And I've seen it not only work on TV shows or news shows, I've seen it work in my own life. In my own life, I've had to change the way that I was looking at things and find out that there was another way, there was another truth, there was another reality, that maybe I had it wrong. And I've had to look at things differently. You know, when I always had this strange idea about how I grew up, how I came into the world. You know, if you can do the math, my birthday is November the 19th, okay? If you count 9 months back, that'll get you to February 14th, Valentine's Day. I've just always had this wild idea, that I was probably conceived on Valentine's Day. I've always had this idea about mom and dad on the 14th of Valentine's Day, and they were, getting together, probably a little wine and a little dinner and everything, and little candle lights, and just, that kind of nice romantic kind of thing. And, I've seen my mom with some glamour shots, okay? And my mom is fine and always has been fine and still is fine, okay? And so I can imagine that dad was, probably getting a little bit tipsy and getting a little frisky, and poof, 9 months later, here I am, I just figured that I was born of love, And that was only one misconception I had about growing up. When I talked to my mom, really I got a different idea. It didn't quite turn out quite like that. I had thought that, that maybe, it was different when I was conceived. It was a little different when I was born. With my parents were both in New Orleans in high school. My mom had went from Kansas to New Orleans, and my mom and dad went to school together. They graduated together. And I'm not sure of the exact time, but my sister was born in November, okay? So I'm suspecting, I'm betting, that probably there was a little something going on in high school, and consequently they ended up getting married, okay? Now, my dad, he's that kind of guy who says, if you get pregnant, if I'm going to be a daddy, I'm going to be there, and I'm going to marry you. And my dad and my mom got married at a very young age. And they had to stay with my dad's parents, which meant my mom had to stay with my dad's mom and his grandmother. And my dad was an only child, and he was real good-looking, spoiled-ass guy. Got it? Okay? So I'm sure it was not a good environment for mom, okay? And by the time my mom was pregnant with my sister, her second child, she'd had enough of that stuff, and she moved back up to Kansas. And my dad, being my dad, he followed her to Kansas. So I just had assumed that, when my first sister was born, things weren't all that cool. When my second sister was born, things weren't all that cool. But by the time it was time for me, they had grown up and they had gotten life together. They had their jobs and stuff. And they're having, this nice Valentine's Day dinner. And, they popping champagne or wine or doing whatever. And then it's me. And mom said, no, Michael, no, nothing like that. Nothing like that at all. She said, your dad got a little frisky, wouldn't let me get to my diaphragm, and boom, there you were. We have these misconceptions about, how we got here, But I just thought that that's how I got here. I thought that's how I was conceived. Now one thing I do know, though, I know that I was my father's first son, and I was that third child, and I used to be at home with my mom, and it was like fantastic. My dad always had a lot of jobs, and he was always working. So my dad would go off to work, my sisters would go off to school, and it would be me and my mom, okay? Now, if you happen to be a mother who has a son, you know that there's a little special thing between mothers and sons. And you can imagine me 3 or 4 years old, and my mom is pregnant with my brother who's coming, and it's just me and mom at home every day. And I'm laying on mom's stomach and listening to my little brother in the stomach and rubbing her stomach and having a ball, just me and my mom. Then one day, my dad used to work, like I said, a lot of jobs, and my dad worked at the VA Center from 3 o'clock in the afternoon till midnight. So in our small town, it would take him about 10 minutes to get home. And by about 10 minutes after midnight, Dad would be home. One night when Dad came home, Mom had left. And my dad was 28 years old. And my mom had left my dad with 4 kids. My older sisters, me, and my 13th-month brother. I can remember that just like it was yesterday. I can remember, Dad getting home and getting all of us around together and, come here, I need to talk to you. And, your mom's gone and I'm not sure what we're going to do, but, we're going to make it or whatever he said. And that was one of the first nights of many nights that I cried myself to sleep every night for years and years because I missed my mom so much. It was devastating for me. And my dad, he now had to find something to do with 4 kids and working all day. And he found a lady who would take care of us. There was an old black lady in town, and her name was Mrs. Davis. And Mrs. Davis took care of kids. And so he took us over there, and we would be over there. But this place was nothing like what I had grown up on. You know, they had an outhouse in the backyard. I mean, a stinky, fly-ridden outhouse, scary to go to at night kind of outhouse to go to. They had those gray tubs, you know, those little wash tubs that kids would play in, and if you happened to be the 3rd or 4th kid to be taking a bath and all that scummy, messy stuff, I mean, it was nasty. I wasn't used to that kind of stuff. They had rabbits in the cage in the backyard, and rabbits had those little pellets and all that little junk, you know what I mean? They had a garden. It just was a filthy house. It was devastating for me. And I didn't know how to deal with that. And this Mrs. Davis, she had a daughter. And that daughter happened to have 2 children. And they were what they called illegitimate children back then. And back then, that was like in the 50s, you know, and illegitimate children, that wasn't a cool thing to have. And this lady, when she saw my dad come through there, I don't know for sure, but my vision is that she saw that good, hard-working man, and she latched onto him, and before I knew it, my sisters were living off with my mom. My dad had adopted these 2 girls. I was living in a new house, and I had this stepmother who was a witch. I mean, just like in Cinderella's story, she was just that bad. The things that she used to do to me, they would put her in jail for today. I mean, we had to eat food that I wasn't used to. You know, my mom lived in the same town, so I would still go visit my mom. And when I go see my mom, we'd have little boy food. We'd have peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and Campbell's soup and hot dogs. I mean, that stuff was good. But when I'd go back to the stepmother, we'd be having beans and cabbage and potatoes and fried chicken, and they'd give me the wings and the bones. I mean, it was just terrible. I didn't like the food, you know. It seemed like her kids didn't have to do the work, and me and my brother did all the chores. It was just like Cinderella, you know? And I hated that. Hate might be a strong word, but that's how it felt then. I surely didn't like my stepmother. It was not a good relationship. And then I had a problem with this other lady who was my mother. So because of my mother, you know, I had all this other stuff going on in my head. So these 2 women had me going crazy. But all of a sudden, I hit that magical age of I think it was around 35 or 40. Now, then that just happens to be about the same time I got into Science of Mind, too. But right about that time, you know. But by then, I had been a stepfather myself, okay? But by then, I understood how much it costs to feed kids. And I understand that all the kids can't have the cereal that's on TV. I understand why you have to have hand-me-down clothes. I understood those things now a lot differently. All of a sudden, I had this epiphany. I mean, it's like, oh, my gosh. And I got up and I got on the phone and I called home and I called my dad and I tried to get my mom. And she wasn't there. She was out garage sale hunting, doing that kind of stuff. And I had my dad track her down. He must have called 4 or 5 places. And I finally got her, and she came to the phone, and she did just like any other mother would do. Michael, what's wrong? What's wrong, babe? And I had to tell her that I finally got it. You know, this lady had chosen to be my mother, okay? She had chosen to be my mother. That's the thing about step-parents. They choose that. And I finally had gotten that she had given me all that love, and all I wanted to do was say, thank you. Thank you. Because when I changed the way that I looked at things, those things that I looked at began to change. And now I could see her in a different light. See, I was now a stepfather, okay? And I was counting the Father's Day cards that I got, and I can tell you I've gotten about 5 in 30 some odd years, so I understand. I'm sure waiting for Kendrick to get to be 40, so maybe I can get some more. But I know the difference, you know? But I grew a little bit then, and I understood a little bit more, and me and my stepmother, we have a great relationship. But I still had that problem with my mom. You know, I used the excuse, at least, okay, that I couldn't even get married to a woman because if my mom would leave me, then I know anybody else would come up would leave me. And I would be darned if I would have a child who would have to deal with what I came through as a kid. At least that's what I told myself, okay? And then I began again to change the way I look at things. You know, my mom had told me many, many times, and it just finally dawned on me about at that same time that, you know, that my father had been abusive. You know, he was a good father, but he was a darn bad husband. You know, and she had no choice but to leave. And now as I get older and I look back and now I understand, it's like, well, what else could you have done back in the 50s? You've got 4 kids. Where do you go? You'd have no job, no way to take care of yourself. Back in those days, it wasn't like you get a divorce and we split up the property, that kind of stuff. No, don't you know where the rule of thumb is? The rule of thumb says that a man can beat you as long as that stick is no bigger than the rule of thumb, than that thumb. Men didn't have a better idea about how to solve conflicts. That's what they did. And then I realized how great a sacrifice that must have been. You know, because my mom would tell me that, you know, Michael, I knew that, you know, you guys would need a good father. And your dad, he may not have been a good husband, but he was a heck of a good father. And see, by this time in my life, I had seen young boys grow up without fathers. And I understood the importance of having a father. But my father is one of the most important people in my life. What it turned out to be is that my mom was giving me the greatest gift she could give me by giving me my father. When I changed the way I looked at things, the things I looked at begin to change. You get it? When you look at it differently, then it begins to change. All of a sudden, my attitude about my dad changed. All of a sudden, I had a better attitude with both my moms and my dad. And I'm lucky enough to say that for a long, long time, I think I've been like that with all 3 of them. And I always just say, God just knew that I would need a little extra help, so I got 2 mothers. That's how it worked out for me. Because I changed the way I looked at things. There's a pal of mine. My pal's here. My pal is Frank. Raise your hand, Frank, so everybody knows who he is, okay? Frank's one of the smartest people I know, okay? He's a scientist, but Frank says some simplistic things sometimes. And at one of the classes he mentioned about, well, you know, if you choose to look at things in a duo way, then I can go there with you. We can be tall and short, you know, dark and light, big or whatever. He said, I can go there with you, but you know that the reality is that it's all one and it's more about unity. Now Frank said it like that, but I can't really say it as well as Frank said it. But I can say it like this guy in the book. You guys are reading the book of the month? Paul Ferrini, right? Here's how Paul says. He says, as we move out of duality consciousness back into unity consciousness, we begin to live more and more in the present moment. Indeed, our sense of the present expands to include the past and the future. Increasingly, we see that everything is contained in the expanded present. Everything that has ever been and everything that could ever be is fully present right now. That is the consciousness of the spiritual master. What does it mean to live in the present? It means no regrets about the past. It means guilt has been acknowledged and released. There has been forgiveness of self and others, and forgiveness is practiced moment to moment as a way of life. It means no expectations of the future. One accepts that the future is mysterious and unknowable, yet divinely guided. Our surrender expectations brings one attention to what is happening now and trusts the future to unfold according to the divine will. The willingness to trust replaces the need to control. When you can move to that point of not worrying about the duality, the 2 sides of it, and just look at it as just one. You know, all that stuff is just the one big experience of my life. It's not neither good, bad, or indifferent. It's just mine. Now, how I choose to deal with it, that's what makes the difference. Coming up with that kind of control. I've got a friend who I see at the men's group. He's right there, Jeff. Raise your hand, Jeff, so everybody knows who you're at, okay? Now, what I see, and I want to make sure you guys get, is that right here at CSL is the divine love in action, okay? If you participate with your pals, then you see, like me and Frank have a relationship. You'll have somebody like that. If you join the men's group, you'll be with somebody like me and Jeff. You'll have that kind of relationship. If you become a greeter, you can hug everybody that happens to come into the place, okay? If you're really good, you get to be a platform assistant like Rashad, and you get to show out every other week up here, okay? But that's because there's that divine love in action here. At our men's club, we were having our check-in where people share something, and it turns out that my friend Jeff shared about his past and his growing up, and it turns out that his was even similar to mine. It freed me up to let me know that sometimes when we share our stories with other people, that can bring forth a healing. So thank you, Jeff, because I've never told that story in public, and I never would have if it hadn't been for you. Thanks. Yeah. I'm not the type that shares that kind of intimate story too much, but Jeff really touched me when he shared his story. And as I was thinking about how divine love shows up in action in my life, one of the big things was just how these two make that difference. Okay? So some of you may be children who haven't gotten it together yet with your parents. Some of you may be parents who haven't gotten it together yet with your children. But I want you to know, and use me as an example to know that stuff does work. It does get better. That TSRW stuff we said, this stuff really works, okay? Let me introduce you to my mother. I love you very much. That's what can happen. You can still remain and still have that kind of relationship. It can work out like that if you learn about divine love in action. I'm going to prove it to you real quick, okay? Somebody told me earlier that I was channeling Tracy Brown, so we're going to channel Tracy Brown for me. This is what Tracy would do if Tracy was here, okay? So group participation. Everybody close your eyes. Just close your eyes and trust me, okay? And all I want you to do is just smile. Smile at yourself. Smile about how good it is to be right now. Don't worry about what happened yesterday or any of those problems or none of that. Nothing that's going to happen later on today, but right now, everything is good. Right now you have enough food, enough air, enough everything. Just smile. Nobody can see you. Everybody else's eyes are closed. Just smile. I mean, like giggly, I feel good about myself. Smile. Just smile. You got it? Just smile real good. You got it. That's what divine love feels like. Can you feel it? Are you smiling so you can really feel it? Yes. If you can really feel it, now open up your eyes and turn to somebody on your left or your right and give them that same smile. It's that easy. That easy. You see? And you guys did the same thing the guys did in the first service. You start hugging and kissing on each other. I didn't say you had to kiss. I just said, look, right? But that's how good it is. And we always have that available to us at any given point in time. If you're looking for divine love or if things are not going your way, just smile. There's no way that you can be upset if you're smiling, okay? And if you want to be really good, I didn't share this one with the first service, but if you really want to be cool, just skip, okay? You know what I mean when I say skip, right? You've seen people skip like that? Okay. That kind. When you get out there on your own and you don't have to embarrass yourself, just skip. There is no way in the world that you can be unhappy when you skip. That's a scientific fact. Okay? So don't say that you came here and you didn't go away with some spiritual practices, some things that you can use, okay? Because you know that if you're looking for divine love in action, you can just smile, right? If you don't feel it, you can just skip, right? That's the good thing that happens here. We learn those principles. And one of my favorite ones is when we talk about spiritual mind treatment. And those of you who are not from here may not understand it, but that's what we just call prayer. And what I like is what Ernest Holmes says is that really, you know, you're not trying to convince God of nothing. All you're doing is having an argument with yourself. Okay? And once you argue with yourself enough till that you believe it because you believe it, now it's going to happen. Right? So that's all that it's going to be. It's just that argument with yourself. And I want you to take home those, okay? Remember that if you change the way you look at things, the things you look at will change. You got it? If you change the way you look at things, The things you look at will change, okay? And you can always do that and find love in action simply by smiling, skipping, or just saying a nice prayer. So if you close your eyes and go within me, we'll do our closing prayer. So with closed eyes and open hearts, we say thank you. Thank you for love, divine love, in all the many ways that divine love may show up. We thank you. We thank you for the mere fact that we are here right now. We are thankful for the present moment. We know in this present moment, because we are here, that up until this point we have handled every disappointment, every obstacle, every challenge that has been in our life. Up to this point, we've handled every heartbreak, every disappointment. We've overcome not having jobs. We've overcome broken hearts. We've overcome not feeling the power and the presence of love. But we know that it's evident just because we are here right now that it's all good. Our lives are good. All those things that have happened to us have led us to this point where we are right now. And we are good, and we are blessed, and we are thankful. We are so grateful for this community. We are so grateful for this philosophy. We are so grateful for the sharing that happens in this place, that happens among each of us. We commit ourselves, we promise ourselves that we will be more love in action. We will smile at each other more. We will skip more. We will enjoy life more. And we recognize all of that right here, right now. Life is good. God is good. Nature is good. Whatever you call it, it's good. And we know that if we just change the way that we are looking at things, we'll see that good. We'll feel that good. We'll be that good. If you agree with me, if you believe as I do, if my words have spoken for you, then I invite you to join me as we say together, and so it is.